Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. Welcome to another episode of our Everything Product series, where, as you know, we are delving into various aspects of building digital products. Continuing with that theme, we have a very interesting panel today and a very cool topic. So today's topic is around the product first mindset, and we are going to go deep into what it is and how it can help while building these products. Let me introduce our expert panelists of the day. First, we'll welcome Sundar Rajan. Hi, Sundar. Thanks for joining us. So he's currently the CTO of Ansys, and he has been building and shaping digital products for a long time. I think he brings overall 30 years of professional experience and has played a variety of roles, in those various organizations, large and small. And specifically also has played CTO roles in many of those companies. Is techie at heart as well as a people's leader, and he has the skill to draw out the best from each and every team member. So is very passionate about working on products of different stages. Really believes in collaboration and is focused on result-oriented brainstorming approach, right? So thanks, Sundar, for joining us. Very happy to have you. Next, we'll welcome Rohini. Rohini is our Associate Director of Engineering at GS Lab. She brings, again, long 17 plus years of industry experience overall. And she has worked in a variety of technical and techno-managerial roles in several organizations. And since she has worked in both service as well as product companies, she understands and brings both those angles as well. So, very happy to have you as well, Rohini. Thanks for joining. We want to have a very quick audience poll question just to take a sense of, who our listeners are today, viewers are today. Yeah, we can flash that question. So let's see how many of you are currently working on a digital product right now. So either somebody is sort of thinking about it or the project is already in progress. Yeah, we can see. We'll be able to see the distribution. Great. So many of them are building products right now. So good to know. Thanks everyone for voting. So sort of before we get into the product mindset aspect, I want to ask Sundar first, a little bit request him to trace his own journey, of being, playing CTO role for a variety of organizations and how that has turned out, and how does he look at those several years of experience. Yes, please, Sundar.
Good. Thanks a lot for having me. It's a pleasure being here, and I love the format where you're able to talk freely. And yeah, to trace my journey in this space, I started actually with a company that was into both hardware and software products. At that time, that is how products were bundled. You had a bunch of hardware and a bunch of software that went with it. Then I worked a little bit with projects also in between, but most of my experience in product comes from the role that I've played over the last 12 years. I've been CTO across 4 different companies, couple of scale-ups, couple of startups. So it's a bit varied in terms of the kind of companies that I worked with. Yeah.
Great. Thank you so much. And we have been proudly associated with you through a good part of that as well. So for the benefit of listeners, maybe in just a few lines, if you could throw light on what sort of products these were, just to give us a flavor.
Yeah. So the first product was with it was a General Electric company that was making products for monitoring of large rotating machinery. So it was sensors which would digitally transform the signals and present it in different forms, partly control based. So you also had a control loop so that you could control the machinery from the software. So it was pretty complex. systems with a lot of people working on it, mostly domain experts who could also code for the norms then, to a little bit more engineering-based products that were I was more associated from a service mode in those companies to an Oracle platform solution, which was mostly for the business enterprises, business and enterprise customers. So that was more in the realm of CRM or in how you manage database servers. Since then, in Norway, I've mostly been associated with products that was related to early warning systems, which is being able to send population alerts across multiple folks. So integration to telcos, integration to other systems, to more weather-based products, which provided, for example, guidance to ships when they are going from a port to port in terms of the weather and how it changes. Also part of a group of companies called Visma, which was into managing board portals and due diligence rooms. My current role is more on an AI-based product, which is around how to make it possible for legal companies to work more efficiently with the large amount of data that they get on a basis of their cases.
What an interesting variety, right? So you have touched and not just touched. I mean, you have built and shaped products across a variety of sectors using a wide range of technologies. So I think that's a very solid, long experience, and must have been quite a thrill to be on that ride as well. So thanks for that, that intro and Sundar. So we'll want to now go into our topic of the day. So we have sort of framed it around product mindset or product thinking. I'm not sort of asking from a textbook definition point of view, but would you want to sort of give a context of what we mean by that and how you look at it?
Yeah, I think one of the things you learn with products, as it is probably true for non-digital products, is also that every product development is different. And the more time you spend making products, you also realize that you don't know everything. And there is so much that you don't know that, you're always learning. So I still feel that the more time I've spent with the product development, I felt that I know lesser and lesser. And you get humbled to the fact that there is more than one way of doing the same thing, and there are no rules necessarily that say that something is right or wrong. So having said that, a broad disclaimer, I think products as against projects have a lot more depth in terms of what you're doing. There is less time pressure. There is also much more longevity in terms of what you're doing. So projects typically, start and end with a certain period, or service systems are also, there is a start period and there's an end period. Whereas with products, you're so involved in it. And it's a pretty penetrative system also. So which means that everyone is involved much more. As against, saying that, look, this is the scope of what I need to build. You need to understand what is it that your customers will do. And the fact that there is plurality of customers also means that there is a need to not just understand what one customer is talking about. You need to understand a variety of folks and how they use the system. This usually means that everyone in the team needs to be very involved with customers, either directly or indirectly. I prefer it to be direct, because then you get to hear directly from a customer what is it that they are doing, how are they doing, how are they solving a problem, what are their constraints, what are they like, and all of this cumulatively helps you build an understanding for the product. So yeah, so in just kind of in a very simple manner, if I were to put it down, there's a lot more depth of involvement from the team on what the requirements are and what are you building compared to a non-product scenario. That's probably the first insight that I can think of.
Right. when you start thinking about this, typically, how have you gone about it? So initially, for example, is sort of the CTO or a product manager kind of a role. How do they get involved, and how do you also, thinking from a lean thinking point of view, quickly have some feedback loops and get the pulse check from the outside, including some initial users or at least some interviews as well. How do you sort of, because this could be a fairly tricky you know time period with a lot of possibilities, and you have to sort of again zoom down and bring them to something more tangible to, so that it can be dealt with technology.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a bit like I think it's Mike Tyson who said this, that all lovely project plans go off the moment you get punched in the face.
Right. Yes.
It's a bit like that. The experiences vary depending on where you are. If you are in a scale-up scenario, you already have a team, you already have a setup, and then you're thinking about if there is a need to modify it, what would that be, and what's the net effect. If it's a pure where nothing, starting everything from ground, I think there's a lot more flexibility to do things the way you want. But there are a lot more constraints also. Like you're also looking at financial constraints. You're looking at, of what can be done in the first place. If I were to draw what is common across all of these scenarios, it is to have a very incremental approach. Try to break everything down to smaller pieces, get them running, see that they are working fine before you build it up. So, if there is a functionality that needs to go in, can you break it into two pieces and have two releases or two pieces that can go one after the other rather than to build it? So as much as possible, go incremental. You also asked this question around, if you're onboarding or putting up something together, right? That's what you were asking.
Right.
So I think it's good to tell the team from the beginning that they are responsible for developing a product eventually, not necessarily just developing the software or coding or doing quality assurance or doing UX. It's equally everyone's responsibility to figure out what the product should be doing and how can you incrementally release it. This means that QA needs to think beyond just saying, okay, here is a bug. They also need to think, we're going to release this, can we do this? The UX needs to think, how can I get this beautiful, lovely UX design out in 3 pieces rather than in one go? So, the people who are coding needs to understand more of the product as to what are we trying to do with it. So I think I would start by already inducting a very strong sense of being in a product environment with the team, but also outside the team. That's another aspect which is just as important, which is if you're in a project scenario, the sales teams are important, of course, as any of the others. The project teams are important. But in case of a product environment, the sales teams are much more important because they are involved much more closely. You're also changing things. You're also closely connected to the market. You want to find out what is it that you're going to sell first. And then you do need to negotiate also, saying that I can't develop this as quickly as you would like. Can I develop something else that you can sell? And these are things that should be kind of percolating down to the level of the developers too. It shouldn't be a decision that the senior management or folks make, which you follow because what you can do, right? So a lot of very good input that you get comes from the fact that the team is so heavily involved in the product itself, not just in individual functions within that product. So bringing that from the beginning helps a lot if you have that luxury.
Right. This must also take a lot of clarity in somebody like you, right, in your mind, because when you are going to help those engineers see the complete picture in their mind before they sort of start tackling their individual pieces. So it also means that somebody who is trying to be at the center, they need to have this sort of a clarity. So maybe could you talk about that as well?
Yeah, I think as a CTO, you're also much more involved. Half of your time is spent on the product and the business, and half of it on the technology side, because you are looking very closely at what are we really doing. And I've kind of learned this by hit and trial. There are cases where I was very uninvolved in the product, and there are cases where I've been very involved in the product. And when I look back, I think it makes a lot of sense for the CTO very much in front of the customers, doing demos, talking about the product. At the same time, being back in the team, embedded with them, understanding the technology problems and exchanging this. You need to be able to translate a technology problem to a business problem when you talk to the sales team. And when you also need to tell the sales team what the technology problems are. You shouldn't hesitate from doing it, even if they don't understand. I get this very often in my current assignment as well as the others, where you say, look, why do you want to show the sales team about API or some complex algorithm? They won't understand. And my answer has always been that they will. It just takes a little bit of time. But as the team should understand about sales things, in a product company, everyone is a technologist. The degree varies, right? So you might know more, and a salesperson might know less, but we are all technologists. So I think it's good to have that. So my role very often is to sit in the middle and do a bit of balancing act, but a lot of translations, but make sure that I understand both aspects so that I can contribute meaningfully to both.
Perfect. Thanks for elaborating on that very pivotal role, right? So let me come to Rohini. So Rohini, so you sort of see all of this happening, from service perspective, and you are leading those teams and taking care of that team. How do you look at it? First, maybe at the high level, and then we'll go into some of the depth.
Yeah, so as Sundar mentioned, like I echo him that the individual contributor, be it developer, be it UX, be it QA, should understand a product well before they start working on it. So even even though we being into service industry, like understanding the stage of product, right? Like there are various stages where it could be from scratch development, where Sundar mentioned that it is easier than to start with, but it has its own pros and cons. But when it is from scratch, there are different angles, different aspects like shaping it together. On the other side, when the product is already developed and we are kind of enhancing it, so uh, it has completely different understanding for the developer, like what exactly is the product right now, what are we trying to enhance, what this feature means to that product, even though the individual will be working on one single feature. So all these aspects are really important for individual contributor. It will be completely other than like one story or ticket has been assigned to me and I will just doing changes in these 4 files and then submitting the code. So this thought process has to be applied before jumping into the ticket. So what exactly am I going to do? What my feature is? What role that feature is playing in that complete journey of a product or the flow of the product? That all aspects should be understood by developer very precisely. The other important aspect or the stage when it comes to the product, where the product is already developed, it could be legacy or there are n number of issues when the product needs to get revamped. It could be from design aspects like the visual design as well as on the technology aspect. Then completely different thought process needs to be applied when developer starts working on it. So they should start going through what pains currently user is having. Is it user pain, or is it a technology barrier, or is it a could be the design is of the old side. So what exactly it takes to have that revamp done, and then what difference I could make, or what kind of a decision I should take, right? So we always say that the developer for that matter QA, are the first users of the product, because it is getting developed and you are doing first user testing to that feature, right? So you should know what exactly it means to product as one part, and to end user as against how they are planning to use it. So yes, that mindset has to be applied by every individual contributing to the product. And yeah, I echo on all aspects what Sundar is trying to bring. The developer should have interaction with sales team, marketing team, for that matter, even support team if product is in market and what kind of issues people are facing. So yeah.
Yeah,
Can I just add something
Sure,
here?
sure.
Just an insight that came in when Rohini was talking about different stages. I think that's really, really an important factor around product development. One very good model to use is what is called Kent Beck's 3X model. Kent Beck is known, I think, to some people at least because of his extreme programming involvement. He was one of the pioneers in that space. So he came up with this idea that there are three phases that constitute a product, and you can call it whatever you want. But there is that, any initial phase of explore, then there is a secondary space of expand, and then there is a third phase of extract. These are the 3 X's. So in the initial phase, you're doing a lot of experiments, small experiments, and more than likely, many of your experiments will fail. But, one or two of them hit off, and then, that's what you build on. And then there is the phase of explore, where you're where you're doing more, where whatever you have created, which is clicking with the market, is expanding. And then the extract phase is where it is kind of now into more of technical debt, refactoring, etc. So in practical terms, this makes a lot of sense, because you have great practices and good initiatives, etc., but you don't have the time and money to do that when you're in a startup at an early stage. So all of those, good stuff that should be done goes out of the door. So you need to the developer needs to also have the flexibility to understand that, yes, there is a very, very good way to do this, but we probably need to redo this anyway in the, the expand phase. So having that understanding is also very critical to build that successful product team.
Very interesting. I think that's a very useful mental model. So thanks for bringing that out. I was going to refer to, an engineer typically will be itching to, start coding, right? Start building something, and, they may feel, at least in the initial phases, that, hey, we are sort of still discussing, you're bringing forth points from potential users, and you're having me, meet and sort of think over some of these things. So as a CTO, of course, you meditate upon this, you have interaction with the outside world, you think about the technology. So for you, it has been sort of, it has been going on in your mind for a while. But for a newly coming in engineer, they may be a little bit itching to, quote unquote, get started, right? Because they may feel that, hey, this is not work, today I didn't code anything. So, you sort of hinted at, how do you get them started? But on some of these conceptions or maybe misconceptions, Sundar, how do you look at these, or how do you explain to people who really need, at least the core members who need to get that?
Yeah, I think one is the focus that you have, the heavy focus that you have around customers. Everyone has focus around customers, but it's more than just focusing around customers. It's also maybe promoting a loyalty towards the product, which is what you encourage from the beginning. Where does your loyalty lie? Does it lie with the technology that you use to enable products, or does it lie with your manager, or does it lie with the customer? I think in products, it should lie with the product. Your first loyalty should be the product. So what are you doing to make sure that the product is good? The technology, everything else is secondary. And I think that's an important thing to emphasize without diluting the ability of the development team to um, to keep experimenting also, because things change so fast. So if you have very strong rigid rules saying that I will only develop in Java, and I will only use an Oracle database, and so comes the non-SQL and something that you're able to develop very fast. So there are models where you can also again think of this, saying that that whenever you look at any technology, you can think of some things that you look at, things that you experiment with, and things you adopt. There should be some criteria related to that, and that criteria should be based on your situation rather than a generic rule that you can pick up from somewhere. So what applies to you? So this model gives you the ability to not completely ignore technology advances, but you say, look, if there is a new technology, bring it in. We'll bring it into the sprint, but we'll classify it first. Is this something that you want to adopt? Is this something that you want to play around with, or is it something that you want to sunset? I'm just randomly giving categories. These are things that I would like to use now. um, so that kind of balances the enthusiasm people have with adopting technologies with the realities of product development. Once you put a product, you don't want to slip out the database and bring in something completely unusual and stick it in. But at the same time, you don't want to build a rigid rule which says that I will never do that. So yeah, bring some balance.
Very, very interesting. So I think I love the point that you made about the loyalty to the product, right? Because uh, when a product evolves, some of the other things may change. Maybe the team moves a little bit, or some, as you said, some technical aspects. If I'm married to a particular technology, then I may think differently. But if I truly keep, or if the engineers and the teams truly keep that product at the forefront, and then be a little more flexible on the other aspects, I think that's a very interesting you know sort of mindset to pick up. So I think I'll remember that as well. So Rohini, coming to you, so when this is happening, right? So on ground, since you manage teams and engineers, their roles as well. So what is their sort of perception in at least in the first few maybe weeks or a couple of months of doing this? Because this might be a little new to them. They may not have done this or heard this sort of a thinking, and they may be used to thinking still in silos, and hey, why should I listen to some other aspect being discussed? Am I needed in this discussion, etc., right? So how do you deal with that on ground?
Yeah, Mandar, you rightly mentioned, like, it is typical perception of developers, for example, that hey, I did this much of coding, I developed these two feature, I fixed these 4 bugs. Against when the brainstorming is happening, or there are day-long meetings, or there are only discussions happening, like what can be done around specific feature, and what can we do, what everyone's viewpoint. So even though meeting is going for 4 hours, it becomes difficult for engineer to digest, hey, I'm not doing coding, so it means I'm not working, which is not the case. So it's like it takes time for them to understand, to realize the impact of their involvement into such meetings happening for themselves. So I like during my one-on-ones, the same engineer multiple times who used to complain me about, hey, what can I do? I mean, what can I write in my timesheet? Like 4 5 hours I am in meetings. Against the same developer coming and telling me, hey, these brainstorming sessions really helped me, even to take decision as small as is this feature need to implement it in this way? Am I really needed to spend this amount of time in this feature when I know the ROI is not against this feature, but what it is uh, giving, like what user exactly wants. So as simple as, like, for example, I want the user wants to view file. Why am I spending time in PDF viewer? So I should spend time in like any other view. Like it doesn't mean that the task mentioned that it is a PDF viewer you will need to implement. So, I mean, all these aspects, the developer himself understand later on what exactly these all discussions or these are conversations are helping them out to take decision while developing, while designing, even for that matter, even doing R&D. Like even doing R&D, you need to decide or sometime give away the solutions which you have found out. So it really helps, and the words are from their own mouth. So yeah, it is impactful, and it really helps to get into that mood.
Right, right. I think that's an acknowledgement of, that thoughtful approach that Sundar has been, inculcating and of course using himself as well. And I'm sure it takes a lot of, involvement, or they have to also a little bit take a leap of faith with you guys, see that process. And once they start seeing it, they see the point of going through all of that. Both of you sort of hinted at or mentioned about decision making, right? And then some little bit spread out decision making, including the developers. So maybe could you, maybe starting with Sundar, could you please elaborate on that? Where, I mean, from somebody as a third party looking in, it may seem to me that, hey, but you may have, I don't know, a dozen plus developers. What sort of decisions are they making, and how do you, avoid mess ups during that, or do you sort of give them some guardrails for it?
Yeah, so one of the things I follow is to have a cyclical system where the team assembles together and plans what is being kind of put out for development, say for the next 7 sprints or whatever. That's what I'm currently doing. And that assembly of people for that period is intended to be a time period where you can discuss things threadbare. So you're looking at requirements, you're talking to the sales team is available. The marketing, if there is somebody from marketing, they're available. So you're first looking at it, talking about the requirements together. And then you also have parallel assemblies. For example, the technology team coming together and looking at the requirements and saying, how do we do this? It's a very broad decision making there, but we do talk together. So I'm my experiences with individual decision making based on a brilliant developer or an architect has not been as good as this process, where you have more collaborative discussions, and then you kind of you also should have, this is harder to do than talk about, is to have a way of registering your decisions also. There is this concept of architectural decision records or lightweight architectural decision records. That's a simple way of recording your decision, which is focused heavily on why did you do something rather than how did you do this. So you can talk a lot about I implemented RabbitMQ as the queuing system, and then blah blah blah, and a bunch of reasons. But why did you need queuing? Is a better aspect to discuss, because then that's more sustainable. That's more something that will live longer rather than a more of how of it. But if you do register that why, and you have a pattern of saying every time a decision is being made, we will register that. That's also one way of bubbling it up to most of the team. But I think the key decisions should be taken collaboratively during some of these assemblies. And having said that, in practical terms, it's always a mix. Something comes up, somebody says there's a big performance problem, slip out the current database, puts a new one in. Key decision. So that needs a lot more experimenting, testing, etc. to be done. So maybe no singular rules, more like a bunch of good practices to follow.
Right, right. Rohini, so when you see sort of, these engineers sometimes wonder about some of these trade-offs, right? As both of you mentioned, how do you help them, get out of that and, evaluate, or at least, begin to evaluate, and then of course you guys are there to support. How do you look at that?
Yeah, so basically getting that decision taking ability at a lower level, where as Sundar also mentioned, right, it is difficult to have that quantified even during the collaboration meetings. Like, is it really helping me to take decision at different levels? Like, basically, when feature is in discussion, like how that feature, like right from UX, uh, the collaboration between UX and development team, it really helps in taking this smaller decision. Sometimes the feasibility check happens during that collaboration meeting itself. Sometimes design, visual design as well as the feature design happens during those collaboration meeting itself. So, and this, I mean, unless and until that process, the developers or I'll say engineer, all sort of engineer goes through that process, they are unable to understand it. So basically I've seen the challenges when there was completely disconnected development have happened, the progressive development, but it is completely disconnected. That UX is working in silos. They are designing as what the user is asking or what product owner is asking. They're designing and they're completely handing over to the development team, and development team going through screens only, and the front end is developing, then API getting developed. So all this, there is no connection in it. So backend is not aware of why this feature is developed. It is just these 5 parameters are getting displayed in the screen. I just pass those through the APIs. This is, if we see, it is very simple. So it is like everyone will start in a parallel. They will do fast-paced development. But the main problem happens when we, at the end, we see, like, as simple as when we are giving sprint demos, for example. It is very difficult to understand what exactly is happening, why this is. So I've seen the conversation started, hey, this parameter was not required. It should be dropped down, not should be the textual thing. So all such problems we have seen. So I have actually experienced these two different scenarios, and then it is very easier. Like, based on my experience, all these examples are very easy for me to explain to engineer. So this is how how this all examples help in having decision taking. How this basically helps in taking decision.
Got it. So I think I really like, that central point that both of you are trying to bring out is that have them walk that journey mentally with you. Have they help them understand the why first, because how may change. You may make a little bit of a different technology decision down the line, but at least the why of that product is there. And one sort of non-intuitive point that Sundar brought out was, that collaborative decision making versus always having just a lone star architect and really depending only on that. So I think those are some very interesting takeaways for me, from sort of these answers. I want to sort of move to the design aspect as well. So there is purportedly there is a design team there, and then there is an engineering team there, and a lot of times we sort of look at them fairly differently, or sometimes we only look at the design team as, yeah, it's just the look and feel, and they're just there to color the walls, and we are really the ones building the house, kind of an analogy, right? So how do you get started by really bringing these two aspects also together fundamentally, Sundar, and then having them look at the product from your lens as well, so that they really work hand in hand, not just, truly in the spirit, not just in the letter.
Yeah, again, it helps to have the UX. I think it's really important to UX or CX, as we call it, have enough importance in your organization. Don't treat them just as people who do UI or color the things. I'm very tempted to do that very often myself, but I think it's important to get them organized and done. But I think it's also important to recognize what they represent, which is the the customers, the user scenarios, the user flows, etc. So in the assemblies that I talked about, where we meet every 3 months, they have a critical role to play. They run it actually. In my older assignments, we had the UX people run those assemblies. So it was almost as if they were the people who were in charge. I think that's how critically important their role is. However, it's also important to have inputs back going into them. Things like collaborative sketching, making it a part of these assemblies has helped. Where, there's a lot of cost involved in developing software, testing it, and then bringing it to some users who say, look, I don't like these buttons. Can I have a drop down? So it makes a lot more sense to have that input come in earlier in the cycle. That's what things like collaborative sketching, A/B testing, etc., will enable. The challenge, of course, is there is a considerable cost associated with doing some of those things and time. It's not always easy to convince your board and your management team that it's worth the time to take 2 weeks off from the whole team, get them ideally into a room. This is again my experience that these things are done very well face to face. It's done very well over the cooler or the coffee machine or over dinner or over a couple of beers or non-alcoholic beers or whatever is your thing, to discuss, talk, to fight. I think that's also just as important. But to go back to your original point, yeah. So that's really important to have the UX guys central, feeling empowered, and even if you turn something down in terms of their suggestions, make sure that they are still respected, and we listen to them on many of the aspects. We trust them to tell us what is it that they think that the customers will use the best with.
True. From whatever little I have seen, so they bring a lot of this, user empathy kind of an angle also, and they have a very interesting point of view. And they, of course, best work when they both work together, right, along with engineering. So again, coming to Rohini, so you see this sort of playing out, as Sundar is saying, in a room, you see the tussle, you see the back and forth as well. And I think you have done that role of facilitating all of that.
Yes.
How has been your experience, and what sort of you learn from this, and how do you do it now?
Yeah, so as Sundar rightly mentioned, right, it is always easy and important to have design first, like what exactly that feature, how it will look like, not only look and feel, but what could be the flow, what will come next. All those angles are discussed and designed prior to development. So, I mean, no doubt there. Definitely, it has to be there. But what important aspects it take when the collaboration happens at the design phase itself, by contributing even developers, if not all, but at least set of developers present while designing is happening, or the designs are getting discussed with developers first, is the feasibility check happens first. So multiple time it happens. Yeah, definitely designers have sky as their limit, right? So multiple times they're bringing very nice look and feel, and the colors, for that matter, to the design. But for the developers, like, certain aspects are there, certain limitations are there when it comes to technology. Finally, it is going to map to the technology. So all these aspects, if it gets discussed prior, then it is easier in the later stage when development is done, even half done, it is getting reviewed by UX, or for that matter the product owner. It is easier to have that journey smooth, and having changes done at that point is more expensive than it is done in the UX phase. So that is how I've seen this. Again, when the work is happening silos, UX team is sitting somewhere else. They are having their own things getting applied, and then it comes to development team. So it really becomes difficult. Then it is completely to and fro conversation. Again, the progress is happening. UX is still in progress. So all this is very in terms of time as well as money, and usually we have the planned releases on time for the product, even though we prioritize, deprioritize, that is different story. But then it impact everywhere. Then it impact on quality, because then you have to complete everything on time, because you have already wasted time in discussing in all non-productive things. So yeah, it is very important, and I have experienced both the angles, and I mean pretty much have been part of that journey, and pros and cons of what have it really takes to.
Got it. There is one question on the aspect of code durability, right? So maybe could you please comment on that? How do you handle sort of that thought process?
What did you say? Code durability.
Yeah.
What do you expect from that? I'm just curious.
So yeah. So when you are going through this product building journey, things may change from externally also, or some technology aspect also, or maybe let me broaden that question, right? So in terms of maintainability also, how do you look at it, or does this approach also help there, because you have put in this sort of a groundwork first?
Yeah, I think it varies a little bit on which stage you are, like I was talking about from that, Kent Beck's 3x model. If you are in the explore stage, you need to do many experiments, and you will fail in most of them, because many of them are not going to be used. So expect that, there is going to be a lot of chaos, and you may be creating technical debt also there by saying, look, I'm going to do this in this fashion. I think it's practical, and it also makes sense to me, because the objective is not to create code. The objective is to solve a customer problem, and you need to find the best way to do that for now. But when you get into that expand phase, this is where these things will start hitting you, where maybe you put some interim solution. That shouldn't make you hesitate to put those interim solutions during the the explore phase. That's okay. And in expand stage, you just need to prepare yourself for the fact that you need to move things out. And then extract stage is the later stage, where you are classically hit with all kinds of accumulated issues of technical debt, and that needs to be handled. I don't think you can go with a system that says I will not have technical debt, or I will not do this. You just need to handle it depending on the stage and the part. So for me, code durability is not an objective in itself. It should be something that helps tremendously, but I wouldn't make my plan, especially with a startup, around that as an objective. And again, like I said, this is my experience, and I realize that different people have different experiences on this.
True. To me, that's actually a fascinating way of putting it, right? The way you said that it's not you're building code, but that's a means to the end, that you're solving a problem through a product. So I think that's very critical to understand, because I think that will guide people, and it probably must have guided you in making decisions, sometimes large, sometimes small, to stay laser focused on solving that user problem and keeping the product at the forefront. And I'm aware that a lot of people probably say this, or maybe write it on their websites, but I think I've and our teams have seen you do it. And so I want to sort of come to that aspect where somewhere in your overall journey, you must have started moving to this, right? You may have done things differently before, and then you probably started thinking like this. What was that transition like? And now, I mean, clearly you guys have both elaborated on sort of the ROI of that. But how do you sort of look at, yes, there is definitely some investment which goes in, involvement, as you both said, time, money, all of that. But a lot comes back as well, for the product. So I'm sort of asking a two-part question. A, how did you sort of come to this thinking? Because it is very fascinating to me. And secondly, now that you do practice it, do you see different types of ROI coming out of that as well? Different benefits.
Yeah, I think the transition is still on. The good thing is that the industry we are in is really changing a lot all the time, and digital products are a lot more flexible to these changes. So I think the first aspect I would keep in mind is to not be very prescriptive on some of these things. Your learnings are only guidances. They are not prescriptions for you to do. So when you get a new assignment, when you're in a new scenario, and within the same scenario, when you're in a different place, if you don't have the openness to believe that there could be some other solution, simpler solution, you might have an intern who's working with you, who's come out with a great idea and a thought process. At times that makes an absolute sense. So um, the one learning I would, if I understood your question correctly, is not to be very prescriptive about it, but use your experiences as guidances, and always be ready to change it and say, okay, this may not be the best thing to do here. So that's the earlier thing also, that the more time you spend on it, the more you realize that there are many more ways to do things than you think. And you pick one and you go with it. That's your bet. It doesn't necessarily make it the universal truth.
It's a great insight, right? Because I think your approach is sort of built around that mental and probably also technological flexibility when you're building that product. So I think that is really coming through. So thanks for elaborating on that. So Rohini, so when are there operational aspects which become easier for you? Are there some which become a little tricky, but then eventually they pay off? Or would you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so when we talk about ROI, I think in numerous points we got to know, we discussed that the investing such sort of time in product discussion or collaborative discussions for that matter, which may sound non-productive at that moment, but definitely it has its own benefits in long term, and that is more high impactful. I must say, because having disconnected development done is so harmful than having conscious development done with a collaborative mindset is of much of a benefit. Definitely, I mean, having so much of time spent together is like sometimes feel like it is a wastage of time, but yeah, definitely. But I will also try to bring one point where it has to be communicated well in advance, like what exactly we are trying to achieve out of this collaborative communication, like what exactly everyone's role will be, what it means when we are talking about what sales team is trying to sell, how much you should be involved, what should be your take. That mindset everyone should have who is contributing to such meetings. Absent-minded meeting attendees will not make any sense. So
right.
definitely.
Yeah, listening to both of you, it almost sounds to me like it's mindful product building, right? Because you are truly keeping the product at the forefront. So there is one quick question from one of the viewers. So they are asking that it's often said that this kind of a team coordination, decision making should be democratized. But their question is that, do you really involve the whole team, or is there some boundary that or there's some contour that you have to decide that?
It's not democratized. It's more of empowered. So everyone should feel this is my product and I should fight for it. Very often I step in and decide, right, overriding somebody's very vehement and extreme pleas on, saying, why don't you do this? So, and I agree, and I like that. But at the end of the day, it's not a democratic process. It's a collaborative process. It's people are empowered to speak up, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a democracy.
Perfect. I think I like that distinction. There is also this angle of and there is a fable that I remember, that there are people who are building a skyscraper, and then somebody is walking by, and then they ask, I don't know, one of the construction guys that, okay, what are you doing? So he just says, I am putting this brick here. Versus the other guy says, we are building a skyscraper. So from your discussion, that's the fable that I remember, because I think you are trying to get that point across to people, that finally we are all building a product to solve some critical user problem. Now, you may be playing one role or the other, and that's possibly incidental, and hopefully people see it in your approach. And clearly on ground, we know that engineers come to see that point of view and come to appreciate it. So I think thanks for elaborating on that. We have a little bit of a different question. I don't know, but let me still ask you, since we have a couple of minutes. They are talking about code reviews and use of AI tools in code reviews. How do you look at that?
Sure, why not? We should experiment with some of these things, and there may be efficiency gains. I don't think we should fear these. We shouldn't ban these, but have open discussions about them to see how to use them. Maybe ChatGPT gives you code, but if you just blindly put the code in, you'll probably get into trouble. But we should explore the boundaries. I think products, you should always explore boundaries. It's a little more restrictive, I think, when it comes to projects. But in products, you can explore these boundaries, and you should.
Right. So you're very open-minded about utilizing some of this new tech and seeing if it improves, and you're also, of course, flexible enough to chuck it out if it doesn't help.
Absolutely.
Great. Yeah, I think we have taken. Let me just take a look if there are any questions remaining. Most were around, trying to get, but I think that you answered in a very interesting way, where you have made the distinction about democratic way of deciding versus collaborative and empowering way of deciding. I think that's an interesting way of looking at it, and quite a critical critical mindset for that. So I think that closes the questions that have been asked online. So yeah, we are coming to a close. So I want to thank both of our panelists, Sundar and Rohini. Thank you so much for your time. Very insightful session. I know we have sort of delved into a very different aspect. This is one of the least talked about aspects as far as I think about it. Thanks for elaborating on it. And Sundar, we love your approach, and I think you have deeply thought about it, and that comes through, that shines through when you explain it. So again, thanks for your insights, and it's great talking to both of you. Thank you so much. And for our viewers, just to mention, so we have been putting out these episodes to talk about various aspects of product building, digital product building. They have all been made available for watching later on as well, and there is a link which is being posted right now for all of you to see. Right. So yeah, please check it out, and we will be continuing with this series. There is another episode coming at the end of this month as well. You will hear it about that from us. So yeah, thank you, Sundar. Any last message or last comment for our audience?
No, I think this was very interesting. It's good to hear Rohini's aspects also, and good questions from you, Mandar. So it's been a great session. Thank you so much.
Thanks for your time. Hey, thanks, Rohini.
Thanks, Mandar. Thanks for this opportunity.